According to the US Census Bureau, during the 20th century, the population under 65 tripled, whilst at the same time their relatives over 65 increased by a factor of 11. As a proportion, shifting the ratio of 1 in 25 to a considerable 1 in 8. Now, projections suggest this will be around 1 in 5 by halfway through this century. So clearly then, it's important for the population to develop and maintain good health moving into later years in order to reduce the risk of illness, injury and disease that will predicate loss of independence and significantly increase healthcare costs. More importantly, however, is the concept of maintaining a good quality of life. And the good news is that to a great degree, this lies in our own hands, with exercise being a key factor as supported by the National Institute on Aging, making it a platform for its Go for Life campaign. There's now an abundance of research to confirm that fitness levels achieved in our younger years can impact upon not just the physical but also our psychological health in later life. In addition, all the signs point to the fact that if we continue to be active, then we can expect to retain a desirable quality of life well into our advanced years. So in this lecture, we'll take a journey through the ageing body and investigate just how it changes as the years go by. We'll also look at what value exercise has in helping us to resist the ageing process and draw up a plan of just what form that should take. Whilst I don't deny we all have a biological clock, if you stay with me for the next 30 minutes, I'll equip you with the tools to seriously slow it down. Be warned though, I'm about to challenge some of your firmly held beliefs about growing old. The ageing process is influenced by a number of factors, but primarily genetics, disease and lifestyle. It's this later variable in particular that has been shown to be susceptible to manipulation and capable of impacting lifespan. Not only is an active lifestyle recommended for good health, whatever your age, there's a school of thought that now suggests the older you are, the more important it is. But what about that old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Is that really true? Let's go to Professor Sapolsky for just a minute and find out what happens in the brain when you pick up something like exercise as an adult.
Amazing finding. One of the biggest revolutions in neurobiology in the last 20 years is the fact that the brain, the adult brain, makes new neurons. New neurons in a part of the brain having to do with memory. You took an introductory neurobiology class any time since the pharaohs, and the first thing they teach you is your brain doesn't make new neurons by the time you're 3 years old. Massive revolution that there is actually, jargon, adult neurogenesis. So what triggers this, what stimulates this? It's environmental stimulation, it's learning new things, it's exercise as well. And what is one of the coolest things about it is making new neurons in response to stimulation, enrichment, exercise, all of that. That is not just the purview of 20-year-old jocks. What the studies already show is get a 90-year-old more stimulated through any of those routes, and afterward, when you examine the brain, there are new perky adolescent neurons there going about their rejuvenating business. Aging is no more a time of life where stress is an inevitability than at any earlier stage.
Now that's encouraging, isn't it? So you don't have an excuse if you've never been active up until now. Of relevant note is that whilst exercise is of benefit at any age, it's been proposed that age 50 years is a critical point at which taking regular exercise can protect against the physical and psychological deteriorations associated with getting old. In other words, frailty and even disability. When we consider the benefits of regular exercise, it's important to stress that these apply at any age, so it's never too late to embark upon a new exercise regime and enjoy the lower risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, falls, stress, and even depression. Now add to that improved strength, flexibility, balance, self-esteem, better sleep, and social contact, and you start to wonder why anyone would not voluntarily partake. It's true to say that exercise can not only add years to your life, but will certainly put life in your years, even if you're currently not active. Before we can prescribe appropriate exercise advice, we need to understand the changes that occur in the body as we age. So let's begin with the bones. We know from our earlier lecture on this topic that a drop in calcium levels is the most noticeable result of aging, more so in women than men, due to the issue of reduced estrogen levels post-menopause. Now, this manifests itself in bones becoming brittle and more likely to fracture as we age. It also introduces the risk of changes in the spine, notably exacerbated curvature, leading to poor posture, also increased risk of falls and extra pressure on key joints. Fortunately, though, there's a wealth of evidence to show that inactivity is the major contributor to osteoporosis and that weight-bearing exercise can retain bone mineral density. This is why there's so much emphasis on encouraging regular exercise from an early age as a preventive measure. However, older adults who commit to 1 hour each day could reduce risk of hip fracture by as much as 50%, although the type of activity is important. Tennis and jogging, for example, are favoured in comparison to walking and gardening, which have showed no effect on the rate of fracture incidence. This is the first point at which we notice the idea that exercise can actually slow the ageing process, although listen carefully as this will become a recurring theme. Since osteoporosis sufferers may already exhibit reduced mobility, clearly exercise will need to begin gently, with aqua exercise, for example, being a recommended option to help improve movement. Although the buoyancy of the water reduces the weight bearing which is needed, so switching to dry land will be necessary as soon as possible. A combination of cardio and strength training is the ideal recipe to begin with, and these exercises should focus on improving the ability to perform daily activities. It's also important to remember from our lecture on bones that adaptations to exercise are site-specific, so a program must incorporate a total body approach. Now, a common feature in older adults is a slight forward bend at the hip and in the lumbar spine, this sort of position like so. So it's recommended to stretch the muscles at the front of the body, particularly if we take the hip flexors. So I'd take a stretch where I'd take 1 foot behind and then a little tilt of the pelvis forwards will start to stretch through here. But also to strengthen the posterior chain of muscles. So exercises that will work through the muscles that protect the lower back. And if you look at our lecture on the spine, you'll find several examples there of how we can do that. Let's move on to the joints. The most obvious consideration in the joints is the decreased range of motion caused by stiffening of the connective tissue around them, in combination also with the muscles losing their elasticity. Also, the production of synovial fluid, that's the fluid that lubricates the joints, this decreases and actually becomes more viscous. The cartilage that covers the ends of the bones can actually tear and lose fluid, so reducing the cushioning effect when the joints move. These changes not only restrict movement, but can actually cause pain, although previous injury is one of the causes for these changes, but also a sedentary lifestyle can be a significant cause. In the spine, the discs between the vertebrae that are also made of cartilage begin to lose their fluid and increased calcium deposits are noted, so their ability to soften movement in these vital joints is somewhat impaired. As mentioned then, these combined changes lead to reduced movement, most noticeably in the ankles, in the knees, in the hips, but this can be overcome through regular activity. Arthritis is the most common ailment associated with old age and actually includes a large number of different conditions that lead to degeneration and inflammation of the joints. Examples being osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis and gout. When considering exercise as an intervention, the first thing to appreciate is that it will not make the condition worse, which can be a common misconception. Not only will it help to improve cardiovascular profile, increase muscular strength and improve your flexibility, it can also have a positive impact on mental health through additional social contact, as we mentioned earlier, enhanced self-esteem and reduced feelings of depression. But even better than this, some studies have shown that exercise can help to relieve pain symptoms in nearly half of arthritis sufferers. So here are some guidelines for this population. Firstly, we need to consider low-impact activities and try to avoid prolonged one-leg work. We need some balanced work, but make sure we're switching side to side. Focus on strength and flexibility at first, and avoid positions that involve you kneeling for prolonged periods. Repeated short bouts are a better option than a long workout. Let's have a look now at muscles. If we now look at muscles, the changes are similar to bone in that there's a progressive loss of tissue with advancing years. But again, the general decline we see is more often associated with inactivity rather than age. Older persons who remain active display better strength and ability to perform their daily tasks than sedentary counterparts. Research suggests that as we age, there will be a decline in type 2 muscle fibers, known as the fast twitch variety, due to the speed of their contraction. So as a result of this, our power will reduce, and so it's fair to assume sprinting speeds, for example, will decrease with age. Potential maximum tension, however, is unaffected, as the motor unit, which is the nerve and the muscle combination, will still perform as designed. So any decrease in strength is due to other influences. This is why some bodybuilders have been able to compete well into their later years. Reductions in the number of blood vessels, enzyme concentration, and the ability to store energy in the muscle cells, and all these factors, will contribute to a decline in muscular endurance. Exercise prescription, then, is clearly going to incorporate strength training, as gains can be made at any age. The beauty of strength and endurance training is that the benefits will not solely be restricted to the physical, as the associated increases in the ability to perform everyday tasks and the reduced risk of falls promote a psychological boost also. In support of the argument that exercise can bring positive changes at any age, a 2007 study showed that after 26 weeks of progressive resistance training, a group of elderly persons with an average age of 68 years were found to improve their relative strength from 59% lower to only 38% lower than the control group with an average age of 24 years. You could even argue that in this case, exercise doesn't just slow the aging process, it actually reverses it. Let's move on to the cardiovascular system. And we find that age-related changes here are less pronounced than in the bones and the muscles, as we've just discussed. The heart retains the capability to supply blood to the body and allowing it to perform everyday tasks. So again, the theory here is that most of the changes we see are due to inactivity rather than age. There'll undoubtedly be a decrease in the heart muscle performance, the efficiency of the blood vessels to transport the oxygen, and the ability of the skeletal muscle to use it. But fortunately, these drawbacks can be significantly mitigated by regular exercise, which can lead to increases in stroke volume, which is the total amount of blood pumped with each beat, the total blood volume, and high-density lipoproteins, or the good cholesterol. So adherence to a suitable exercise program, then, can afford a high protection against cardiovascular disease, the sort of things we associate with aging, for example, hypertension and diabetes. Next, let's consider breathing and how aging affects the mechanics of respiration. Although our breathing apparatus is fully grown by our mid-20s, the efficiency of gaseous exchange continues to improve into early 40s. And you'll recall that the gaseous exchange is simply the process of carbon dioxide and oxygen circulating between the blood and the lungs. Now, this is why endurance athletes, such as marathon runners, will reach their peak a little later than athletes in other disciplines. Ingeniously, the respiratory system is designed with extra capacity so that when a decline begins from age 40 onwards, it isn't noticed in the course of carrying out common daily activities. Changes are more likely to restrict the ability to accommodate strenuous exercise. So let's consider some of these physiological changes. Firstly, the lung volume will decrease as the lung tissues and the chest wall lose elasticity. There'll be a reduction in the number of cilia, the tiny hairs that remove particles from the airways, and that can increase the risk of infection. Collagen builds up around the alveoli, those little air bubbles, leading to a reduced surface area and so diminishing the exchange of gases, leading to a little less oxygen being available. Calcification affects the trachea and the rib cartilages, leading to a stiffness that reduces the ability to expand and take in more air. Now, these factors combine to initiate a gradual increase in the rate of breathing that tends to be shallow chest breathing. This doesn't preclude exercise, but leads to the suggestion that deep breathing should be consciously encouraged, and alternating intervals of higher and lower intensity will be preferable. Positive adaptations have been noted in asthmatics who engage in regular exercise, although in this case, recommendations are to begin gently and gradually increase to a medium intensity. A training program should also include exercise to encourage good posture, especially in the thoracic region, as this will clearly impact upon breathing mechanics. Finally, on our tour of how aging affects the body and its functions, we'll consider the nervous system. Now here, evidence shows that coordination declines with age. But interestingly, research has shown that active older people have faster reactions than inactive younger people. Again, suggesting that a sedentary lifestyle is the key factor rather than the passing sands of time. In our look at the brain, we established that neurons do decline naturally, but physical challenges such as learning new motor skills can lead to development of an unlimited number of neural pathways. A notable point here is that if a muscle is not regularly used, the motor units that control it can shrink and the neuron becomes less efficient, so proving that inactivity accelerates the aging process. In addition, due to the cardiovascular changes that take place that we discussed earlier, blood supply to the brain may decline, restricting the oxygen provided, and without this fuel, brain processes can be prolonged, which is what causes loss of coordination and an increased risk of balance issues, with, of course, the potential for falls. Diminished neural activity can also lead to a slowed reaction to requirements for redistributing blood supply that results in blood pooling, the term given to blood remaining in the extremities, which can cause dizziness. This can manifest itself in a drop of blood pressure if standing up quickly from a sitting or lying position, something that's known as postural hypertension. So, as you'll be aware already, aging is linked to degeneration in both sight and hearing ability. The lens loses elasticity, and so making it harder to focus, in addition to which the iris muscles weaken, and so the amount of light entering the retina is reduced, and hence the problems. The light-adapted eye of a 20-year-old receives 6 times more light than that of an 80-year-old. In dark-adapted conditions, the 20-year-old eye receives about 16 times more light. In comparison to younger people, it is as though older persons were wearing medium-density sunglasses in bright light and extremely dark glasses in dim light. With hearing, it's mainly the ability to detect higher pitch tones that becomes difficult, although other sounds can be a problem if there's a high level of background noise. Whilst many elderly persons are unwilling to accept the reduction in these senses, it clearly happens, and it's a contributory factor in balance issues, especially when combined with the slower speed of information transfer from the skin, vibratory sensors, and the muscle and joint receptors. You may remember we talked about the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs in our stretching lecture. As we've already discovered in previous sections, regular exercise can bring about improvements in the cardiovascular system. Also, breathing function, muscle performance, and all of these will enhance the efforts of the central nervous system. Now, thus far, we've only really scratched on the surface in the domain of exercise prescription, so let's dig a little deeper. A critical phenomenon to take on board at this stage is an appreciation of diversity amongst the older population. So, to support this, bear in mind the oldest person to complete a marathon was, get ready for this, 98 years old. Yet a UK study revealed that over a third of people over 50 who have no restrictive medical conditions just simply don't exercise regularly. In the US, national data shows that only 31% of those aged 65 to 74 participate in 20 minutes of moderate physical activity on 3 or more days of the week. Only 16% report 30 minutes of moderate activity 5 or more times a week. And the figures decline even more for the truly vigorous physical activity that can really help to maintain your cardiovascular health. So when we try to define the concept of aging, it's clear it has relative social, functional and chronological dimensions. The gym is the home of an incredibly wide variety of exercise and program variations, but a proportion of these are purely for aesthetic gains. For the older exerciser, however, the desired goals are more likely to be the ability to carry the groceries, being able to stand up from a chair without emitting a groan that I notice I've started to do, and having the energy to take the family dog for a walk in the park. This is what the physiologists refer to as functional fitness. It's totally relevant to your day-to-day living, and it's the difference between independence and potentially becoming a burden on those close to you. So your quality of life, both today and tomorrow, is at stake here. So this then provides the framework for us to build an exercise regime. In order to develop or retain a desirable degree of functional fitness, the following components are the targets for improvement. Firstly, cardiovascular fitness, on muscular strength and endurance, flexibility, balance and motor skills. So let's look at these in order, look at them in a little bit more detail. Cardiovascular training will induce improvements in your maximal oxygen uptake, leading to an enhanced ability to walk, cycle or swim without discomfort, in addition to giving a general feeling of having a good energy level. Cardiac output, lowering heart rate and also reducing hypertension are key bonuses. The blood supply and enzyme concentration leading to better muscular endurance will increase. And so we've got, various improvements here, but the requirements to bring these about are that we need to aim for something every day if possible, even if you have to build up to this. Try to avoid high intensity exercise. We're looking at medium intensity, around 5 to 7 out of 10 on an intensity level, depending on your current fitness level. 30 minutes is the target, but remember, benefits can be accrued in a piecemeal fashion. So 2 lots of 15 minutes or 3 bouts of 10 minutes will produce the same gains. So suddenly it doesn't seem so onerous. I'm sure you can manage 10 minutes. The exercise mode should incorporate movements of large muscle groups. So walking, cycling, swimming are the favoured options. If we move now to training for muscular strength and endurance, these are the kind of things that we can expect. We can expect increased strength and so the ability to lift and carry things at home. We can look forward to better endurance, enabling us to walk up and down the stairs much more easily. Increased lean muscle tissue, helping to boost metabolism and so control body composition is a welcome change. And of course, enhanced bone density, decreasing the risk of fractures. So how do we bring about these improvements in muscular strength and endurance? This is how we do it. Firstly, we need to include exercise for all the major muscle groups, and that's in common with our cardiovascular training. 3 times per week, ideally with a day's rest in between to allow the muscles to rest. Overload is the key. So workouts must lead to muscular fatigue. So you may need to build up to this at first. Again, expect to take around 30 minutes, performing maybe 2 to 3 sets of an exercise, and we're looking for 10 to 12 repetitions of each exercise. For those who are comfortable, gym workouts are an option, but beginners may prefer the comfort of home workouts using just your body weight as a resistance, and we've got a specific workout for you later in the series to do just that. Let's have a look at flexibility training. And this can bring several positive benefits, such as increased range of movement, making it easier to perform our daily tasks, lengthening the key postural muscles, leading to better static and dynamic posture, plus improved balance. Less stiffness, less pain on moving. Wouldn't that be welcome? So, let's look at the guidelines for flexibility training. How do we get these improvements? Begin with just 2 stretching sessions each week and build up to 5. Remember to always warm up first with at least 5 minutes of gentle cardio type activity. Mix dynamic stretching techniques but not bouncing with static stretches that are held at the end point of mild tension for 15 to 30 seconds. Again, have a look at our flexibility lecture for some tips there. Try to include stretches for the whole body, targeting problems that may exist, for example, stiffness due to old sports injuries, or maybe rounded shoulders and short hamstrings due to years of working in a seated position. Remember, when doing your stretching exercises, try to keep your breathing relaxed. Next on our shopping list is balance. As we have seen, balance is a composite of several functions working in harmony and will be directly affected by the previous fitness components: muscular strength, flexibility, especially in the lower limbs. Now, balance, as we've already established, can be static or dynamic, and it's governed by 3 senses. There's the visual, the vestibular, where sensors in the inner ear detect the position of the head, and then somatosensory, which includes touch. So how do we train to improve balance? Firstly, adopting wide, narrow and single leg stances for basic exercises such as a bicep curl or squats will help to develop static balance. Use movements in all directions to promote gains in dynamic balance, so try not to always be working forwards, backwards and side to side. Let's move at diagonals as well. Include exercises that employ functional training equipment: the core board, the wobble board, the TRX, the straps that you can hang from the ceiling, and things like flexibar or body blade, the things that we have to shake and use the vibrational energy. Finally, let's have a look at motor skills that will, unfortunately, deteriorate, but can, fortunately, benefit automatically from the previously mentioned balance exercises. However, including the following also will lead to even further gains in coordination. Playing catch with a knobbly ball, an uneven ball, or a partner to give an element of surprise will develop quick reactions. Performing your exercises at different speeds. Simple things like walking your usual route to the shop but in a different direction, learning a new swimming stroke. All of these things will help. Whilst much of this presentation is focused on the multifarious benefits of exercise for the elderly, we've also established that regular exercise throughout our lives will build a degree of protection against many conditions and make a big difference to quality of life in later years. So let's try and put together a blueprint then to help you to adapt your exercise regime to the challenges of aging, ensuring you derive the maximum benefit. Let's break it down by decade. We'll start in your 20s. At this point, bone density is increasing, so it's vital to exercise appropriately in order to lay down as much bone tissue as possible before the decline begins. Cardio activity should be weight-bearing, therefore, so opt for high-impact aerobics and aim for 2 weight training sessions per week. If the free weights area of the gym is not your cup of tea, try a group exercise class, maybe something like body pump group resistance. Your target working heart rate is at its maximum now, so your cardio sessions should be intense. You should be pushing yourself, maybe up to 90% of your recommended range, which you calculate by subtracting your age from 220. You're also at your most flexible around now, but don't let this lead you into a false sense of security. This will decline as you age, so don't skip your stretching, particularly after your workout. Allow at least 10 minutes and aim to lengthen the muscles in the whole body. It's a great time to start including yoga or Tai Chi in your workouts, for example. Moving on to your 30s, this is when the first signs of aging process will really begin to manifest, with loss of muscle tissue most noticeable in the back of the upper arms, sometimes unsympathetically labelled as bingo wings. Unfortunately, losing lean body tissue also leads to a slowing of your metabolic rate, so this is when the pounds might begin to pile on. Increase weight training to 3 times per week now. Target your problem zones, the triceps, the abdominals, the buttocks, as this could be the decade of childbearing. So this could be an issue. Busy mums, be aware that you need those cardio workouts. But we've said that 3 times 10 minutes is just as effective in terms of calorie burning as a 30-minute bout. Bone density here is at its peak. So choose weight-bearing exercises such as jogging. The metabolic rate begins to slow in your 40s, together with changes in hormone levels. So you may notice the storage of extra pounds. In addition, your target heart rate declines. So it's important to lower the intensity, but therefore increase the duration of your cardio workouts if you want to burn fat. Start to think now about protecting your joints from wear and tear by opting for low-impact exercise. So switch jogging for power walking, high-impact aerobics for spinning, indoor cycling. Weight training should remain a staple of your exercise diet, not only to counter the inevitable muscle loss we've already spoken about, but also to give the requisite strength to tackle your daily tasks such as carrying the shopping to the car, digging the garden, whatever. Moving on to your 50s, it's vital here to maintain activity levels as the risk of heart disease increases and bone density decreases due to the lowering of the estrogen levels post-menopause. Circuit training here is ideal. It'll combine cardio and strength work, so it ticks both the boxes for us. The best option here is the PHA format. We spoke about that in a different lecture, alternating upper and lower body exercises at each station, as this will give a greater calorie burn. Now, this is the time when stiffness is noticeable, particularly in the lower spine, so flexibility work is seriously recommended. Consider yoga and core conditioning exercises to improve posture and to protect your back. The good news is that after 60, it's actually better to be slightly overweight. Caution the word slightly there. And this is because the risk of osteoporosis and fractures is actually higher if you're too thin. Now, don't let this deter you from the prescription to maintain cardio exercise to burn calories. Think about activities here that are easier on the joints, as the thinning cartilage and the stiffening of the tendons and ligaments can leave them a little more susceptible to injury. So this is where aqua workouts are perfect, since they allow for the muscles to work against the water resistance for toning benefits, but the buoyancy supports the joints. Walking should be your prime cardio option here, whether in the form of a country hike, early morning mile walking before the shops open, whatever it is, a stride session on the treadmill, or just a weight loss power walk. If you carry some weight while you walk, you'll also help to maintain your body density, so a couple of little dumbbells in the hands perhaps. Whilst not an obvious choice for most pensioners, gym sessions are also vital, particularly if practicing functional strength work on the cable machines to mimic everyday movements. So doing chopping type movements will mimic the idea of picking things up and putting them on a shelf. I remember a few years ago, one of the leading sportswear brands gave birth to the slogan, "Fitness is a race with no finish line." And I certainly hope I've now convinced you of that. The quality of your life in later years is only loosely linked to your actual age. Rather, the most important factor is your activity level. Although often muttered as an off-the-cuff phrase, the concept of use it or lose it carries much greater meaning than it first appears to. If, like many of us in this day and age, you're looking for the secret of eternal youth, I think that in exercise, you may just have found it.